Edisto Island Historic Preservation Society, and today we have a treat for you in our virtual tour series. This is the fourth of our tours, and for this month we're at the Hutchinson House, and we have John Giroux with us, who's with the Edisto Island Open Land Trust, and he and I are going to talk a little bit about the history of the house and the family, and then we'll give you a tour around the property with Dean Haviger, and then we'll go inside as well. I want to explain one thing to y'all. Obviously we are outside, and you may hear some distracting noises because there's a group of hunters adjacent to us with dogs and ATVs, so hopefully they won't make too much noise while we're filming, but if you hear stuff, that's what it is. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
This month's tour is going to be a little bit different angle than what you've seen in the past. Our last tours have focused on bringing a historic house up to date, making it more modern, more comfortable, while retaining the integrity of the house. This month we're going almost the exact opposite, in that the Hutchinson House is being restored to what it once was. So we're going backwards this month, and I think it'll really be interesting for y'all to hear what they've done, what's going to be done, and what has been done. Tell you a little bit about the house, and pardon me if I look at notes, I'm not really good at remembering specific dates, but the house is thought to have been built in 1885, right, John?
That's correct.
And it was built by Henry Hutchinson for his wife Rosa as a bridal gift when they got married. Henry was born a slave on Peters Point Plantation, and he was the son of someone you may have heard of, Jim Hutchinson, who is believed to be by both families the son of Isaac Jenkins Michael, who was the owner of Peters Point Plantation, and his slave Maria. So he would have been the half-brother of Townsend Michael, who you learned about in the first two series over at Sunnyside and Shadyside. He was the owner of that property. So that's the perspective of Henry Hutchinson, and you hear the guns in the background now. Henry was born, as I said, born a slave, but then was freed after the Civil War. And this house is the oldest existing Freedmen style house on the island. You want to tell us a little bit about the land trust involvement in the property, how y'all got involved?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind, there'd be correcting just a little bit.
And filling gaps.
Well, we have there is the John Thorne house,
right,
that's on the island,
right,
that is potentially a little bit older than this house. It's just been modified significantly since it was first built, whereas this house has been maintained in pretty much its original condition.
And another difference is this is on the National Register and the Thorne House is not, because of the modification.
That is absolutely correct. Yep, absolutely. So we love that we're a part of this project. The Land Trust has been around for over 25 years. We just finished our 26th year being a conservation group on the island, and our predominant mission is the protection of land on Edisto. We were created to preserve and protect this island from overdevelopment. So we have been working for that period of time with landowners who are willing to put up conservation easements or to secure conservation easements on their properties, and that restricts the future use of their property. So they give up a lot of their potential development rights, which allows us to keep this rural nature that we have on Edisto. So that's been our primary focus, is to keep Edisto, to keep Edisto from being overdeveloped. And this project fits in really well with that concept, because it's not just about the house, it's about the 20 acres that we've now acquired that surround the house that are also being protected through this project. So it's pretty awesome. We worked with you, Gretchen, with the museum back in 2016 when we knew the house was going to go on the market. We knew that the family descendant that had inherited the property was going to list it and try to sell the original 9 acres that were part of the house. And we worked together, we worked with that descendant. He agreed to help us stall a little bit while we could figure out some funding, and the Land Trust was able to take out a loan from the Community Foundation in Charleston, and we purchased the property that included the house at the end of 2016. So I think it was December of 2016 that the Edisto Land Trust was able to acquire the property and immediately start to figure out what the heck we were going to do with this.
Once you caught the car, you had to
right.
figure out what to do with it.
That's right. We grabbed it by the tail, and now we had to figure out what to do. So the Land Trust really knew the first and most immediate thing was to protect and save the house. I mean, it was literally in a state of disrepair, potentially, it was going to crumble. I mean, it's amazing. And as we've gotten to the point where we are today, all of the contractors, all of the historic preservationists who have seen the condition when we started to reveal by pulling off some of the siding, the fact that it still was standing today, it was just a head scratcher. People couldn't figure out why it could still be standing because it was so deteriorated and rotted. So the Land Trust acquired it in 2016. We put a canopy over the top. The first thing we realized was that water and that rot was the biggest issue. So it was completely exposed. I mean, open windows, doors, holes in the walls. So we put this really crazy canopy over the house, which a lot of folks may have seen. I hope you'll have some pictures up in here. And that protected it. That really helped weatherize the majority of the house. And it provided a really nice shelter for some of the contractors who have been working on it. So you really just asked, how did we get involved and when was it? And so it was 2016 that we got the house, and we put the protective canopy over at the end of 2017, I'm sorry, and we paid off the loan in that first year, $100,000 loan that we took out to buy the property. We paid that off within the first year thanks to all these amazing donors and supporters out there for the project.
Before we get into the intricacies of the restoration, I want to talk a little bit about the family. As all of you, or most of you who have been to the museum, you've seen the display that we've had for years on the Hutchinson family. And I'm pleased to say, proud to say, honored to say that I've become really very close friends with the Hutchinson family, who are no longer called Hutchinson anymore, but they've changed, the names have changed over the years, but direct descendants of Henry. And I first met the two that are one who died about 5 years ago, but dear friends, Arlene Estevez and her cousin Patty. And Arlene is a great-great-granddaughter of Henry Hutchinson, and Patty, I believe, is a great-granddaughter of Henry Hutchinson. So they are direct descendants. And remember being in the house, their grandmother, Miss Myrtle, was a direct granddaughter of Henry's, and she was the last one to live here way back when. But the way I met them, I was in my office in the museum one day, and I heard this shrieking downstairs of these two girls just jumping around and hollering. They were so excited, so I had to go down and see what they were doing. And it was Arlene and Patty, and we, from that moment on, became just dear friends, and became friends also with their grandmother, Miss Myrtle. Went to Charleston several times to get items that we have added to the Hutchinson display that are within the museum. I hope a lot of y'all have seen those, and if you haven't, I hope you will come see them when we open back up. But so as John knows, this is a very personal project for me. As I said, Arlene died about 5 years ago, and I promised her literally on her deathbed that I would do everything in my power, the museum would do everything in our power, and in conjunction with John's organization, promised her that we would save the house, because that's what the family wanted. They just did not have the funds or the wherewithal to do it, and so that dream is coming true, and we're grateful for all y'all are doing. Will you tell us a little bit, John, about what plans once the house is restored to what and if y'all look at this, it doesn't look anything like you think it would if you've seen it before, because all the porches are gone, the green color, the dormers, well, the dormers are still there, but the gingerbread, a lot of the things that people associate with the Hutchinson House are temporarily gone, but they will come back. But will you tell us a little bit about what the Land Trust has in mind?
You bet, and I'm glad you said that, because folks, we've got a parking area, so folks are pulling up and seeing the progress that we've made, but are wondering what's going on here. And if you really don't know the house, it kind of looks like a schoolhouse, or it looks like a church perhaps, but it's because it's just in a state right now of transition, and the siding that you see is all predominantly new siding. So all of this white treated siding, and it's also primed. This is just the prime paint color, so this is not the final color. As a matter of fact, we're hoping to get it painted in the next couple of months to get a coat over this priming, and it's likely we're going to go back to that green that everybody's familiar with. So the green and red roof is what everybody has seen for so long. So
you wouldn't even know this was the Hutchinson House if you just saw it in a field somewhere.
Exactly, that's right. So the idea is to take it back to that very old picture, the oldest picture that we have, that circa 1900, that is just becoming so iconic because it's got the family out front with their possessions and their horses and in their carriage, and so a really beautiful photograph, but it really is the only great photo that shows the three-sided wraparound porch that was on the house and all of the gingerbread trim work that was on there, that decorative trim work. And that's the photo that really captures so many folks' attention, especially the preservationists, because it was such a unique house. It was built so well, the craftsmanship was amazing, and it was a real gem for the freed folks on the island at that time. So that's the idea, is to take it back to that original state, put those wraparound porches back on the house, to potentially put the back of the house back on. You'll see here shortly that the back of the house has just been completely boarded up. It was the worst deteriorated portion of the house, and so we've just got plywood sheets completely just enclosing the back of the house for now. But that is the plan for the house itself, is to literally bring it back. So this is kind of a combination of several philosophies. It's really a restoration project, it's a rehabilitation project, and it is a preservation project. So the interior is where we've got some of the best opportunity for preservation. As you'll see when Dean takes everyone inside, that there's a lot of wonderful original features to the house that are intact. They are distressed, but they're intact, and so we intend to maintain and preserve some of the interiors so that you'll see that original condition. But truthfully, the idea is to bring the house back to all of its glory when it was first built, so folks can see the pride that Jim and Rosa and the family had in building this wonderful testament to their survivorship, coming out of enslavement and being able to build such a special structure. So we really want to show it in its prime, when it was really beautiful and at its height, in essence, and interpret that and tell the story of the family. So we will have a wonderful opportunity for folks to come out to the whole 20 acres. You'll get to tour the grounds. There's a lot of stories that we're going to tell about the agriculture out here as well. So we're going to tie the land and the entire concept of land ownership and the beginning of land ownership. Gretchen, one of the most amazing things about this story that we're uncovering as we do more research. I mean, we dug in to saving the house and just keeping it from falling in on itself.
Right.
But now we're branching out, as we're getting more progress, to doing research into the historical side of the house and to the family side of it. We have gone through a historic title research on the house, and we've traced this house back to the first land grant on Edisto. So Paul Grimble, who we all know, Grimble Plantation, was the first Lord Proprietor's deed on the island in 1683, and it is pretty 90% certain that this was part of his 1,560 acres that he first acquired on the island.
And for those who are not familiar with Paul Grimble's plantation, it is literally just down this road, and you dead end into Point of Pines Plantation, which, just to connect dots further, is the plantation where we were given, from which we were given the slave cabin that we then donated to the Smithsonian. So it's all one cohesive story.
It really is, and that's the concept we want to convey with the interpretation here, is this whole story of Edisto. We're going to obviously make this the centerpiece, the foundation for the interpretation. The Hutchinson family, their history, their story, because it is just an amazing story and it's so well documented, but it is going to tell the bigger picture story of all of Edisto and how we went through the first white settlers on the island, all the way through enslavement, all the way through to today. So it's going to be really a neat project to tell to visitors, to locals, to folks like us. I'm learning so much through this process. It's amazing.
And the Hutchinsons did have an incredible history. They were leaders in the community. We haven't mentioned that Henry ran a cotton gin for about 20 years, right up until the end of cotton on the island. And Henry and Rosa had 4 children. 3 of whom, I believe, were school teachers here on the island. And Jim, his father, was known as one of the Black Kings of Edisto. Was a political leader, a business leader, and a very influential person in the Black community. So the family has a rich history in and of themselves, in addition to the house. So it's a great, rich story that they have to tell. And I'm really glad Dean's going to be able to take us inside, because I've been inside, many times over the years, but nobody's been in since, when was the last time people could safely go inside? Maybe 5 years ago?
Possibly. I'm terrible. I've been letting people go inside and bringing people inside the house. Unfortunately, it's hard to say.
Oh, there the guns.
There we go. It is. It's at least 5 years. Yeah, the house.
Yeah.
It really rotted. And what happened? The rear of the house, the main sill beam on the back of the house collapsed. It folded in, and so it made the house incredibly unstable, which again is why all of these historic preservationists and architects have looked at the structure and said, I can't believe this is,
Still
it's made it through
standing.
hurricanes and
Yeah.
storms, and it's just amazing. It didn't want to come down, so it's a special place.
And from the museum's point of view, I can't tell you, I've been there, I think, 15 years maybe. I constantly had people say, why can't y'all do anything about the Hutchinson House? Why? It is a place that is truly loved by visitors and members of the community, white and black alike, and everybody wanted it saved. Can't you help the family? We of course didn't have the funds to do it, and it wasn't for sale either at that time. So we could not put money into something that we would not be owning while the family still owned it, and Steve was not ready to sell it at that point. So it was a complicated story as to why it got to where it was. But we're just so thrilled that the Land Trust is taking this on, and we look forward to working with y'all to telling the story of the family and the house.
Well, this is great timing. So we're so excited that you all are doing this. I mean, we're doing this on the weekend of Martin Luther King.
What better time to do it?
Amazing time to do it, and it's just such a great story. We just submitted a grant to the National Park Service last week, which was an African American civil rights grant, and it's the first time we've submitted for funding for this project related to civil rights issues. And you mentioned Jim earlier, and it's such a rich documented history of him fighting for equal rights for property, for land ownership, and so it's going to be a wonderful story to be able to tell.
Jim, who is Henry's father, really was a mover and a shaker in helping freed slaves buy property on the island. So he was very benevolent and fair and looked out for his fellow community members to help them get their feet on the ground after the Civil War ended.
Absolutely.
So, shall we introduce Dean?
Yeah, you bet. We're really fortunate. We've got an amazing individual here. His name is Dean Habhegger, and he and his wife, Barbara, they have been a dynamic duo. They have really been helping us for the beginning of this project, honestly. And Barb has been a grant writer, volunteer with the Land Trust, and Dean has been a boots on the ground, helping us through this entire summer of restoration in particular. I mean, he's been helping from the beginning, but Dean's our incoming vice chairman of the board of the Land Trust, and he is also the chairman of the Hutchinson House committee. He's done an amazing job, and so we're going to let Dean walk you through his 62 or 63 days he came out in every single day the construction crew was out here for this summer of restoration work and documented the entire thing, so he knows the ins and outs of everything.
Welcome to the Hutchinson House as it sits today. Far cry from what it was 2 years ago. As John mentioned earlier, we had to do some immediate phase one, we called it, rescue to the house itself, which included the canopy that went over the top. It also included the construction of a support diaphragm that literally held the house up, and that was where we started. Shortly after that, we had a survey and a report put together by an architect and a preservation specialist and a mechanical engineer that basically told us what we had to do phase two, which is what you see in front of you now. Then we had to get a contractor that would be able to complete the project, and we ended up selecting Artist Construction, who has a lot of expertise in rebuilding historic buildings and other structures. What you see is a lot of work that had to be completed, and we hope to have it done in 8 weeks. Of course, that didn't happen, construction projects being as they are. So, I would like to point out some interesting things about the Hutchinson House. It is not an ordinary house from the time period. There are a lot of unique architectural features that are part of this house. Unfortunately, some of them aren't on the structure yet, which includes some very fancy trim work, and of course the big three-sided porch that wrapped around the front of the house is not on yet, but that's a future project. Some of the other features are it has a lot of windows. That's highly unusual for a freedman's house, or any house from that time period. There's 15 windows in this house, and that includes a lot of light in the dormers. There's 2 dormers on the back, so the upstairs, and the whole house is well ventilated because they could open all these windows. Also notice it's sitting rather high in the air because it has 4-foot piers here, which is also unusual. Usually they were perhaps maybe 1 or 2 feet high just to keep the house off the ground. This was built much higher, which elevated the house, and it's a very comfortable home because of the breezes that come through it. Also, a very interesting feature is the roof itself. There's a flare on the bottom of the roof where it comes into the eave, and that is very unique for this time period at all. And so that shows one of the features that the Hutchinsons decided to add to their home. We believe that Henry's uncle, John Pearson Hutchinson, had a hand in constructing this house, both the design and helped as a carpenter within. And he was an unlicensed architect in the city of Charleston. In fact, he designed and built the Central Baptist Church in downtown Charleston. And so if he had a hand in this, that would explain a lot of the architectural features that are very interesting and in many cases unique to the period. So also, if you'll note, when the end of the house, the gable end, you see the eave or the rake comes down, and there's pieces that come in from the side. Those are called eave returns, and that is also an extremely unique and very complicated type of construction to be able to put on a house. In the future, we're going to have the original porch as noted, and that will also include the back porch that was part of the house. And unfortunately, we don't know exactly what was back there, but we'll do our best to reconstruct that as needed. I think it's a good time to go inside the house now. Okay, we are in the on the first floor of the house on the west room. There are 2 rooms on this floor, and there's 2 rooms above that are in the similar position. Some of the interesting things in this room, you'll note that all of the walls are covered with beadboard, and that's not a particularly unusual feature except the amount that's in here. Every wall in the entire house has been covered with this beadboard. It's interesting also because most of it has been, we believe, either recovered from other buildings or possibly purchased in separate lots, because there's several different styles of beadboard. Some have 3 beads, some have 2, some have 1. And so it's a very interesting feature of the house as well. Want to point out on this side here with the fireplace, a house this size would normally not have 2 chimneys or 2 fireplaces. They'd only have 1, but this house has 2. This would have been the main living space, and therefore this fireplace here with the wood surround is quite ornate for a fireplace in a house of the 1880s. Then behind me here is the stairwell. This stairwell is also very unique. We've had several architects walk in and say, that thing is unsupported. It's very well constructed, but it is cleverly designed so that there are no supports coming down to the floor on the landing part. I would like to move on to the next room now. All right, this is the east room of the first floor. This room probably was a bedroom, and I want you to note that there is a fireplace. This is the second fireplace, and there are a couple of things I want to point out with regard to the construction of the house. You can see here the darker wood and the wood that's been eaten away by termites. That was throughout the house. We kept finding it everywhere. And in order to strengthen it, we put what's known as a sister board screwed into that board that was the original piece. And that stud wall is also protected on every side by these sister boards. That strengthens the house. That has been done through the entire house. Rafters, floor joists, all of the stud walls. And we also have here an example of some of the original siding. Very little of the original siding could have been used to re-side the house, so we had to have new siding cut and planed for the job. Also, one of the unique features in this is this door, which we believe is one of the original doors. For a good period of time it was covered up. The wraparound porch at some point was removed, and the porches that everybody sees in the later photographs on the south side and on the west side replaced that big porch. And when that happened, they re-sided the house and they entirely covered up this door for years. We could see it inside, but there was no sign of it on the outside. And that is great because it has the original ornate decorative hinges, which is another unique feature in the house, both top and bottom in the original lock set. And that gives us an idea of what they originally had on all of the doors, most likely. Over here is how we found most of the interior of the house. Paint peeling and in pretty much disrepair. But the good news is it's remained pretty much unchanged since the house was built. And so one of the things that we are going to be doing soon, we're going to have the College of Charleston building preservation class do a paint analysis so that we can correctly refinish the inside of the house with the appropriate colors and types of paint before we move on. We still have a lot of work to do. You can see since that wall was not covered yet, we have to find some beadboard to replace that with as well and get that finished properly. And that's it. All right, let's go upstairs. This is the west upstairs room. It was obviously a bedroom, as were the one on the east end. Wanted to talk about all of the flooring in the house is original, and I failed to mention that the ceiling in here is not that tall, which would be typical for a story and a half. But the downstairs had 9-foot ceilings, which was probably very rare when this house was constructed, and from a Freedman's point of view it was rather extravagant even. Wanted to point out up here, this beam that you see running across here is the header on the north side of the house. The whole north side, as John mentioned earlier, was pretty much gone. It had failed. The house had actually dropped about 8 inches where that failure happened. And one of the biggest projects in the house was to make sure that that solid sill beam was replaced. But in order to do that, they had to replace this beam, which had also basically rotted away. And once this beam was in place, then they could jack up the lower beam, or the house part, and they could put that beam in and keep the studs and replace some of the missing studs. So, quite a process. Out here you can see there's some scaffolding. We are currently a little bit of afterwork. One of the chimneys was knocked down several years ago, and the masons have come to start rebuilding that chimney. And not only are the chimneys 2 chimneys and 2 fireplaces, but they're also very ornate in and of themselves, which is unusual. That's what I have. All right, this is the east bedroom upstairs. Want to point out that the masons had been here previously to do a lot of work, and they repointed this chimney as they did the other chimney. This one is the one that's broken just above the roof line, but they had repointed it up to that point so that they're ready to go with the rest of the repair. Would like to talk a little bit about the windows. As I said, there are 15 windows in this house, which is a very large number of windows. And we had hoped to be able to salvage and preserve at least 1 or 2 windows, but they were so badly deteriorated that we just simply couldn't. So we had to have a complete reconstruction of all the windows. And that was quite a process. We had to find somebody who knew how to do that. And we did use period wood. This is all heart pine wood in all of these windows. The windows have the muntins are designed, you notice they're extremely narrow, and that's also, it has a name, it's called lamb's tongue, and it is a very short time period when they were used. And it was between 1880 and 1895 or such. In any case, we had the windows all redone. The carpenters had to completely rebuild the entire system for the windows. And by the way, every window is operable. That's why we have these sticks, so that people, if they want them open, have to put a stick in, because they will slam shut. I guess that's it. Okay, there's a couple more things I'd like to show on the outside of the house, and so let's go on out. Okay, talked about the north side of the house, and this is what it looks like. We aren't entirely sure how this is going to look when the house is finished, but for the time being we've just covered it up with plywood paneling. And if you note the chimney above, that is the ornate part of the chimney that I was talking about. The top, the cap part is quite ornate. Okay, this is the east end of the house, and there's a couple of items I'd like to point out. The first being this green siding is some of the oldest siding, and maybe the original for the house. It came from the upper gable here. And also, I'd like to point out that doorknob. As I mentioned earlier, this whole wall was covered up with siding, and that door was hidden behind it. And we did not see what was behind that door because it wouldn't open from the inside until we took the siding off. And that's when we found that ornate doorknob.
I hope you've all enjoyed the visit to the Hutchinson House, and I want to thank Dean and John with the Land Trust for taking us through and explaining to us what all is going on. And we'll see you next month, maybe. Thank you. Bye-bye.